like and subscribe. Now. 41.4k women of Reddit. What was your worst run-in with a creep? A guy at my university followed me around for about 15 years. I have a unique surname. There used to be a way for students to use Pine to find out who else was logged in and where on campus. He would use that command and show up in the computer lab and sit next to me. He looked me up in the phone book and showed up at my parents' house. After a restraining order, you would think it was done right. Wrong. I was speaking at an international conference in another country. Guess who was sitting in the front row? This was a conference for a very niche scientific field that he was definitely not part of. A few years later, I was at an alumni event with my husband. My husband left the table to go to the washroom. Guess who sat down the second he left? Police were called. It's been a few years since the last incident. Still paranoid. 14 years old and alone on the subway. Man sits in a seat across from me, spreads his legs and starts masturbating through his pants while staring me straight in the eyes. I was getting ready to jump up and run out at the next stop. An older gentleman suddenly appeared, stood directly in front of me like a shield and stared the guy down. At the next stop he pointed to the door and made him get off. I hope I said thank you, but I was in shock. So thank you, dear man who protected me and made me feel safe. So, last year I got a flat tire on a semi-busy road right when a snowstorm started. Since I had AAA, I figured I would use one of my roadside assistants to have them replace the tire with a spare that I had, and I wouldn't have to go outside since I forgot gloves. While I was waiting, a mid-40s early 50s man came up to my window and asked if I needed help. Thinking that he was just a good Samaritan at the time, I thanked him but told him, no, I was just waiting for AAA. Now, if he left here, I would have a nice story about a guy willing to help me with a car problem. Instead, he gets downright pushy. He lives nearby. I can just take my car there and change it in his garage. Why don't he just stay in his house until AAA comes? I kept telling him no until he starts yelling, and I rolled up the window and he starts pounding on it. Eventually he left when the AAA guy came. But I still took a very long and circuitous route home. There was a creepy hunched old man who used to come into a pub I worked at. He used to say and do slightly weird things, and then one day he called one of the glass collectors fat. She was 16 at the time, and to apologize he went to fist bump her, then grabbed her hand and put her fingers in his mouth. What is a totally wrong thing that has become so widespread it's not considered wrong anymore? Harvesting as much data as possible. You have to go to some extreme lengths to prevent your personal information being sent to random strangers you have never met. Making terms and conditions overcomplicated and long. Interestingly, because they are so long and dense, there have been several court cases in the US stating that they are not legally binding, since you are not expected to actually read it. How much material classified as recyclable is, in truth, not recyclable. It's more a marketing win that kept people using plastics. Why else would China stop taking the world's trash? They could do nothing with it but bury it in the ground. Taking pictures of strangers who aren't doing anything wrong or untoward just to post up on social media with some snark or judgment. What are some luxury items which you never knew existed, which only the mega rich can afford, that blows your mind and you wouldn't mind having, or is just an example of how people have too much money and not enough sense? It's not really a luxury item, but this guy I knew in the dorms never wore socks more than a day. He just put on a new pair right out of the package every day and tossed the old ones in the trash. It's not like he even did his own laundry either. He just collected his clothes in a big bag and someone would pick them up at the front desk and return them washed and neatly folded once a week. He was shocked to discover that the rest of us not only did our own laundry, but also laundered our socks. Oh my goodness. My grandma knew some rich girls in college that stayed in the dorms, that would only wear an outfit once and then throw it away. So my grandma and other girls would go dumpster diving for the rich girls' clothes, wash them and keep them for themselves. I know a couple who live in Nick who have a live-in nanny for their 2 dogs. They hire a different veterinary student every few years. The student gets their own suite, a town car, a generous salary in the high 5 figures, paid trips home twice yearly, and nice bonuses. Their only job is to care for the pets, including home cooking their meals, walks, training and any appointments. By all accounts, it's a pretty sweet gig. Some super yachts have support vessels or shadow yachts. It is essentially a second ship that follows you and your yacht and carries smaller boats, jet skis, helicopters, subs, you name it. Just the most exorbitant toy hauler. A guy in my town bought 4 plots of construction places for houses across the street and turned them into garden, solely so his view wouldn't be deteriorated. The plots were $500k each. A partner at my wife's firm bought his neighbor's house when they listed so he could knock it down and make a garden, then did the same with the neighbor behind him and put in a tennis court, pool, and pool house, which has an attached 2-car garage and like 3 bedrooms, and these were all $1 million homes. So now he owns 3 out of 4 houses at the end of his street, presumably biding his time for the last one. What's the quote that permanently changed the way you look at things? People don't think about you as much as you imagine they do. Socializing is just like any skill. You need to practice before you're good at it. My mum, comforting me when I was struggling to make friends. My buddy Josh has autism and will occasionally ask me why anybody would even like him. I tell him, I don't know man. We just do. It's not the answer he's after, but it's the answer nonetheless. Resentment is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. When seeking revenge, dig 2 graves. Confucius. A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. John Shedd. My best mate's favorite quote was, smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. Use what talents you possess. The woods will be very silent if no birds sang there, except those that sang best. Henry Van Dyke. The pain I feel now is the happiness I had before. That's the deal. C.S. Lewis. Oof. Gut punch. Grief is the loss of what we love. Deaf people. What are the most inadvertently funny accidental signs you see from people who don't know sign language? My mom tried to sign, I'm his mother, and ended up saying, I'm his B instead, in a church. I'm not deaf, but I took sign language in high school. Family members picked up signs here and there. I was serving on the altar during a mass when I leaned over and made a comment to the person next to me. My grandmother was sitting in the front row and thought she was signing, stop talking, literally, not how you would actually say it in ASL. Her fingers were closed and it was one hard tap on the chin with a B. She had just sternly said, stop B. Naturally it was everything I had not to die of laughter. It was also the only time a fellow parishioner had her deaf sister at mass and she was sitting only a few seats down. I never saw her again. Not an accidental sign, but I was awoken by an alarm that I didn't mean to set, and instead of actually turning it off I just signed don't at it. Took me a second to realize why that was wrong. I'm not deaf, but when JZ opened for U2, he and his crew kept making that diamonds sign and trying to get the crowd to do it too. It means vagina in NZSL. In NZSL the sign for 6 and sister are very similar. I've seen people sign that wrong. Sweet Home Alabama. If you could reset your life to the age of 6 years, but keep your memories, skills and knowledge, would you do it? Why or why not? I've had this daydream so many times it's not even funny. Mom, Dad, look, you have to trust me. Buying Bitcoin is a really good idea. Probably can attempt a speedrun to get back where I'm now's a genius for my age. Genius kid, burnt out adult. At least that is how it seems to go a lot of the time. But seeing as you'd be a lot better equipped for it, I'd assume it would go different than a first time 6-year-old. Mom, Dad, look, you have to trust me. Buying Bitcoin is a really good idea. Exactly. Why waste time on doing anything but having fun, then dropping $50 on BTC at $0.0001 each and being a billionaire in 2021? We're kids who weren't bullied. Why do you think you weren't? Genuinely oblivious. I know that. Just don't react isn't good advice, because most people simply cannot hide their emotional reaction, and even the slightest reaction gives a bully the feedback they need. So this isn't meant to be advice to someone who does notice and feels bad about bullying. But if you genuinely don't react because you genuinely don't even notice what they are saying or don't care, it really does work. You're just not a fun target. to me. Anyone who was mean to me was like a weird creature from another planet. I was as curious as anything, but I didn't really want to interact with them, so I would just shrug. This was not a reaction that gave them the feedback they needed. Also, resting B face. I wasn't as weird as the other weird kids. Cause I have a resting B face. I have a resting A hole face. A lot of people ask me what's wrong when I'm on my phone or reading a book or just doing nothing in general. When I tell them nothing, they ask why I look angry. Cause I was homeschooled. Hey bud munch, hand over your lunch money. Sigh. Okay, mom.